Lilo and Stitch is a live-action Disney remake directed by Dean Fleischer Camp, mainly known for directing Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. This movie stars Maia Kealoha, Sydney Agudong, Chris Sanders, Zach Galifianakis, and Billy Magnussen. The film is about a lonely Hawaiian girl and the fugitive alien who helps mend her broken family. This is one of the many Disney remakes I've been pretty skeptical about since hearing about it happening. However, upon hearing the director in mind, it did give me a bit of hope, as I did like Marcel the Shell. Despite this small bit of hope, it still makes me beg the question as to why these movies keep being made outside of Disney just wanting a profit. So, with that thought in mind, is this movie worth remaking at all? Does it do anything new creatively where the two movies are able to exist and audiences can get different things out of it? Well, that's what I'm gonna tell you. I'll start off with the performances, and the first one I will get out of the way is Maia Kealoha's performance as Lilo. I will admit, there are a couple of moments in this movie where the girl is charming with a line delivery here and there, and to her credit embodies the character of Lilo pretty well, managing to bring this animated character into reality. However, it could just be my thing with child actors, but there are just so many points in this movie where I couldn't get behind her acting. I understand it's her first role, and I understand she's a child actress, but there are far and few good child performances in movies anymore, and this surely isn't one of them. However, without being entirely cruel, I can sympathize with the fact that for a child her age, the hardest part of this performance had to have been acting against nothing, as obviously Stitch is a CGI character in this movie. There is moments you can tell that even though she is trying, you can clearly see difficulty in her eyes, having to follow wherever Stitch will end up being once the effects have been put in post-production. But like I said, for anyone, this aspect of acting must be hard in general. So I understand this is one of the weaker points in her performance. Like, it does make sense. I will say as well, there is a pretty bad moment here where Stitch and Lilo are cornered by a villain in the movie, and Lilo's actress just doesn't have a convincing enough reaction. In this moment, she should be scared, and in her face, she just gives nothing. Sydney Agudong is fine as Nani in this movie. I feel like as the movie went on more, the chemistry between her and Lilo became more believable and sympathetic in my eyes. However, for some reason, during the first half of the movie, the relationship they had with each other just didn't seem all that convincing. She does well in some of the more emotional moments of the movie, particularly in the moments where she's deeply caring for Lilo. It feels believable. There isn't really too much else to her character though. Chris Sanders reprises his role as Stitch, and I'm not going to talk heavily about his performance, not to discredit it, as voice acting is just as worthwhile as regular acting, but it's pretty much the exact same as his performance in the original movie. There were a couple of moments where I did end up cracking a smile, and I'm not entirely sure if this is because it would remind me of moments from the original, but it could also have been in the way Stitch behaves. No matter what this movie was going to be like, I think it would have been kind of impossible for them to fuck up Stitch as a character. And thankfully, they didn't, which in a way is a shocker considering Disney's track record with these remakes. So in regards for Stitch in this movie, I really don't have any complaints. Zach Galifianakis plays Jumba in this movie, both as a voice role and as a physical person, which I can say as I saw the trailers for this thing, and they do reveal that both Jumba and Plinkly have human forms, which I will get to later in this review. Galifianakis does a decent job in this role. I do think his voice got a bit distracting at times. Jumba in the original has this expressive, boastful voice with an accent, and I don't think Galifianakis' voice did this type of character justice. On one side, he's meant to be goofy, but he's also meant to be this genius as he did create Stitch. The smart side of his character he does pull off well. Surprisingly for Galifianakis, they give him less funny things to do in this movie than you would expect given his track record of other movies, but just because he isn't funny doesn't mean he brings a terrible performance by any means. I just think he's a bit miscast. Billy Magnussen plays Plinkly in this, and is basically the polar opposite of what I was saying about Galifianakis, as I think he was, to his credit, cast decently. In regards to his voice for the character, it feels a lot closer to the original character's voice, and he's given a lot of comedic moments in this. Some of the physical comedy he does is okay. He's very expressive with his facial expressions. However, as a side note, I just feel bad for the guy, because looking at his track record of recent movies, at least, he isn't in that many great ones. This guy may need to find a new agent, because my god. Courtney B. Vance plays Cobra Bubbles in this, and he really doesn't do all that much. He's kind of left to the wayside, so I don't have all that much to say about him, other than despite him being just fine in the role, I think he's another example of being miscast. From what I remember from the original movie, Bubbles has this booming, domineering voice that commands your attention for a majority of the runtime, and while he maintains this status as one of the antagonistic forces, which then leads itself to comedy when he has his arc in the original movie, and that's just missing here. And it all makes less sense when that actor who gave the animated Bubbles his voice is still alive. It's hard to talk about the plot of this movie because if you have seen the original Lilo and Stitch, you know what will happen in this thing nearly beat for beat. The only thing in this movie is that some of the scenes are kind of switched around, which was an odd choice. I think some things I have to talk about are some of the changes that are made, and the only way I can do that really is by delving into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, and if you care about spoilers, I would recommend clicking away now. So right off the bat, they get rid of one of the original characters. They get rid of the original movie's villain, Captain Gantu. When I realized this halfway through watching, I couldn't help but think of how dumb of an idea this was to do. And instead, they replaced this character by making Jumba the villain. On paper, this could be a good idea. Jumba made Stitch and is forced to retrieve him to correct his errors, but towards the third act of this thing, it oddly makes the character less and less likable. Despite him being an alien, he seems to have just completely no feelings for both Stitch and the people of Earth. Now, to an extent, Jumba not having feelings for humans makes sense. But we see later in the movie the other aliens are actually capable of being sympathetic towards humans, so it makes no sense. But what I found particularly interesting about making Jumba a villain is the subtextual implication behind it. So in the original movie, a very iconic thing about it is the concept of Pleakley and Jumba cross-dressing in order to blend in with the humans. What makes this joke work is the fact that they only wear human clothes and wings, but they still look like aliens. Very obviously, they still look like aliens, but everyone just thinks they are regular people, and that is the extent of the joke. It is never meant to be a dig at cross-dressing or anything like that. I've never seen people make complaints about this, so maybe, on one hand, Disney did think people had issues with this concept, but thinking about it more deeply, I believe they could have had a more malicious intent behind this. What they do differently here, which may have been for budget reasons in fairness, was Jumba and Pleakley have these devices that make them appear as humans. In the first scene, they turn into humans. There is a joke where the two have to adapt on walking on two legs, which doesn't make any sense because we can clearly see before this that Jumba already has two legs. While we see Pleakley act and dress flamboyantly, this is the most they were willing to go, and while the original movie didn't have explicit implications of making at least Pleakley queer, people have joked that the way the two appear has almost made people adopt them as sort of representation for that community. So by making Jumba the villain in this movie, it seems to be that they were trying to avoid this concept as heavily as possible. The idea of making a character which has become rep for queer people the villain of your movie seems a little targeted and was certainly annoying to see. I wonder if other people that were watching this version of the movie kind of got that impression as well. Another part of the movie that annoyed me was a post-credit scene that's thrown in. At the end of the movie, we see Nani go off to college. During the post-credit scene, it's revealed she has attained the portal gun that Jumbo has, which was taken, I guess, off screen because we never see how she gets this portal gun after he was, taken care of. My question is, firstly, if she had this gun in college, which we are made to believe is far away because we see her get on a plane, how does she get that thing past customs? And two, if she had the portal gun to begin with, why the fuck would she even need to get a plane anyways? It didn't make any sense, and while they end the scene on a tender moment, it left me with more questions than anything. I have to give this movie credit. I don't think the effects in this movie are terrible. The opening act begins in space and we see different designs for space shuttles and the surrounding planets in general, and from looking at it, a good bit of effort was put into it. I think Stitch looks okay, at least. I would have preferred him to be a bit brighter than the color he is in this, but I do appreciate that his eyes, he is very expressive, which gives to a lot of his comedic moments, so at least Disney knew not to try and make Stitch look completely realistic. The best course of action is to keep that cartoony design and just place it in the real world, and thankfully it worked well here. I can't really say the same for a lot of the other aliens. I don't think a lot of their designs look very good. They tried their best to translate the cartoon designs into 3D, but looking at them, they do fall into an uncanny factor. Kind of was weird to look at half the time. I think this movie is shot fine. There's a bit of effort put into making this look like a real movie for once, which is most likely down to the director. There's a nice few really shallow depth of field shots during the dialogue scenes, which tend to be a little impressive when Stitch is on screen. At one point there was a strange zoom out in an attempt to make a comedic moment, and when it happened it kind of just felt like a scene out of The Office. It was a very weird placement. I think the music in this thing is one of the highlights here. The original score, composed by Dan Romer, is a delight to listen to over the scenes and helps solidify this Disney product as a summer movie for kids to enjoy. It's mainly based on Hawaiian music, which obviously is the same type of music that was in the original. Whenever these tunes would play over the scenes they were used in, I thought they complemented the scenes well. The licensed music was nice too. Again, like the original, there's a few Elvis songs in the movie, which was nice to hear. I will say though, however, the most iconic scene in this movie is probably where Stitch is used as a speaker for a record player, and in this movie that scene is completely butchered. In this version of the movie, Nani is too distracted by her phone to care about what's going on, and to top it all off, it even ends on a fart joke just to show that the makers of this product do not care. Overall, obviously from a lot of the complaints I didn't really like this movie. I doubt I'll ever actually enjoy a Disney remake, no matter what the movie will end up being, but it always hits a little harder when the Disney movies I care about are made into remakes, which is why I'm really dreading the inevitable Hercules remake that Disney will do. I just find it amazing that these things are still happening, but at the same time it doesn't surprise me. I've noticed this movie in particular is being perceived pretty well, so I guess this review is pretty redundant, but I do believe it's only due to the love that the original movie has. Those Disney adults, they are so funny to me because you would expect them to be more pure over their Disney movies. But every time one of these remakes gets announced and then released, they just eat it up instead of sticking with their animated movies, which is why we only get the occasional Disney animated movie nowadays. At the end of the day, it's clearly not a movie for me, but I will argue that it couldn't be released at a more perfect time. Summer is only around the corner, and the company knew this. I think when kids go to see this, they'll get the same type of feeling, but I can guarantee they will like it more than I did. There were a few families in the screening I was at, and they seemed to enjoy it fine, and I think at the end of the day, that's what matters. I'm sure before studio interference came in, the director had this in mind, that he wanted to make a pretty good family film, and while I wasn't impressed, I think at least some part of that was achieved here. I'm giving Lilo and Stitch 2025 2 stars. While the performances are fine at best, lending themselves to be just engaging enough, I think the main problem boils down to some odd casting choices and ridiculous story changes that bring the movie down more than elevate it. I know if it was an exact copy and paste of the movie, I would probably be complaining as well, but when the changes actively make the story worse, it's hard to enjoy it. Recommendation wise, I will admit it's certainly not the worst movie you could show your kids. Hell, it's not even the worst of the slew of Disney remakes. But at the same time, in my opinion, I do feel like, in a way, you could also do a lot better.